Welcome to the WP Builds podcast, bringing you the latest news from the WordPress community. Now, welcome your hosts, David Wormsley and Nathan Wrigley.
Hello there and welcome to episode number 265 of the WP Builds podcast. This episode is entitled, Have We Set the Right Expectation? It was published on Thursday the 10th of February 2022. My name's Nathan Wrigley, and just a few short bits of housekeeping before we begin. If you enjoy the content that WP Builds produces, I would very much like it if you felt able to share that around the internet, whichever way works for you, but some examples might be go and give us a rating on Apple Podcasts. A 5-star rating would be very, very nice. Alternatively, just tweet a message at WP Builds. All of those things would be really nice. Of course, I leave it up to you how you wish to do it and where you wish to do it, but just to say that it would be really nice and it does help the podcast to grow. Another thing you can do is head over to our subscribe page. That way we'll be able to keep you updated as and when we produce new content. We've got our This Week in WordPress show every Monday, which then comes out on a Tuesday. It's live. Then we've got the podcast, which you're listening to now, and we're also doing the monthly UI UX show with Peach and Neri. You can find more about those at wpbuilds.com and the subscribe page, wpbuilds.com/subscribe. Okay, what have we got on the podcast today? Well, it's David and I. We're still in Series 1, but we're now on Episode 5 of our WP Business Bootcamp, and this episode is all about setting the right expectation. So, as we'll describe in the episode, we're dealing with a new client, somebody that we've never worked with before. And in fact, we have never really done this work before. And so we're diving into all of the different things that we need to do in order to set our business up. And one of those things is client communications. How do we work with clients? How do we establish a relationship? How do we let them know what it is that they're going to be dealing with? Perhaps they've never had a website build before, and it's pretty much unlike anything else that you might purchase. So how hands-on do you want them to be? What kind of things do you want them to give you? How are you going to gather the content? What forms of communication are you going to use? How are you going to do revisions and all of those kind of things? It's a really interesting episode, and I hope that you enjoy it.
Welcome to another in our Business Bootcamp series. It's the series where we relearn everything we know about building WordPress sites and running a web design business from start to finish. Presently, we are on Season 1, where we're looking at what needs to happen before a build, and we are on Episode 5, where we are setting the right expectations or working out how we do that. So Nathan, we are on different routes with our invented businesses and trying to get our client's website up. So shall we just recap where we are up to in the process so far?
Yeah, okay. We're working from the basis that we are brand new to the web development industry. We've perhaps dabbled in creating things for ourselves, and maybe, who knows, we've done something on a not-for-profit basis for somebody else. But we've been reached out by somebody's reached out to us and they said, we'd like a website. And all that we know about them is that they are called Ms. A and that they are a lawyer. Above and beyond that, we're trying to figure everything out as we go. And in the previous episodes, it kind of worked out that David and I were kind of going off in different directions. He can tell you about his at the moment, but mine might be described as the more traditional approach, where I'm doing things like sending out a contract at the beginning. I'm offering a fixed price for a fixed website and so on. You might describe it as the waterfall process, but essentially a lot of work is done up front, and then the client and I sort of part ways for a while. I do lots of building and then come back and say, there it is. What do you think of it? So that's kind of my approach, whereas yours is totally different.
Yeah, and we're at the same point here. So you put in your proposal and the contract, and it's been Miss A has gone with you, but she's like Schrodinger's cat. She's also gone with me at the same time. And I'm going the agile route, which is it's a fixed fee for a sprint of work, but the number of sprints is really up to the client, so they can control their budget. The proposal is nothing formal, and I'm expecting, or at least I'm selling to the client, the idea that they'll put out a minimal viable website, even a landing page, and we'll move through sprints of work and improve it iteratively. So that's the idea with it. It's an ongoing process where we'll just start with the least cost and keep improving.
It sort of occurred to me that maybe as this series goes on, the differences between the two approaches will become more and more obvious. But right at the outset, they are really, really different models. And I've never really done your model simply because I didn't really know it existed. So as these episodes go on, I have to confess that I'm more and more curious about what it is that your approach is offering up.
Yeah, well, I'm still learning it. I mean, this is really what we're doing here. I didn't realize there was such a thing as Agile or understand it like I do now. And the more we were just talking earlier, and really in some ways, I just think, even though you've always done a traditional approach, I think a lot of your thinking is Agile anyway, the way that you deal with clients. And this is what we're moving on to with this one. Are we setting the right expectations? Because we've set the proposal and you have the contract, but that really doesn't tell us anything about how the working relationship and the processes to building that site will run. And there's obviously some little areas where we can end up with some problems. There's some well-known areas where there's points of friction, isn't there?
Yeah,
in
and
a website build.
What's really interesting about this is that those points of friction, I think, had to be discovered by me. I didn't read any literature which forewarned me about them. It was just a pitfall that I fell into and then got out of that one and then fell into another pitfall and then slowly over time built up a kind of more of a protective layer, really. Oh, I don't want that to happen again, and I don't want that to happen again. But there are loads of things that can go wrong. And if you're new to this industry and have never done it before, there's a lot that you need to insulate yourself from. And setting those expectations right at the outset is a huge thing to get right and will ultimately, I think, save you a lot of time, heartache, and probably money.
Yeah. And I think the first title we've got on our notes here is how hands-on do they want to be? And for me, that's becoming a big thing. I mean, most of us are now working with page builders. We give them that option to be able to update their content later. Perhaps they could still be working on the site while we are running it, which is something which is the way I'm moving much more towards. So I think I never really asked much about this. In fact, I still haven't. I haven't really asked much about what the site we're making, how precious this might be to them, how important the look of it is, or are they the type of person who just, look, I'm trusting it to you, you get on with it, and that's it, and they're going to stick to that.
Yeah. I think there are 4 sides to this coin. Right. To justify that. I think there's 2 sides to my coin. In other words, I think my personality plays into this quite a lot. In other words, if I am really outgoing, very confident speaking to strangers, very confident pushing forward my ideas and saying why this is the right thing and why this is the way that we're going to do it, all of that factors into it. But also that could also be I could be the opposite of that. I could be the kind of person that just likes to work on my own, like to be told what to do by a client, get on with it, and then just present it back to them. So that's 2 sides of the 4-sided coin. And the other 2 sides are from the client. It depends what their personality type is like. And again, I don't wish to boil it down to personality type, but broadly, this is what I'm meaning. That they may be very outgoing, gregarious, prepared to talk to you, prepared to work with you. Alternatively, they may be really hands-off, nothing to do with personality. They literally might have been given the job, get the website built for the firm, it's up to you, you've got 6 weeks, go. And they may not wish to be involved with it because they've got their own caseload of work. So you can see where I'm going. It depends on what I'm like and how I like to work, and what they're like and how they like to work.
Yeah, and I think emotions come in to this process, which we often underplay because, particularly with the proposals and contracts, it's about this business negotiation to build this site. But when we're actually building it, trying to establish whose feet are going to get trodden on in this is quite tricky because it's very emotional, and we are. So trying to get some insight to how precious the site is going to be to the client. Because we were talking earlier and you picked up on what I said, which is, I'll kind of repeat it, is the fact that if I'm given the job, of getting on with it. So they say to me, you know, you're the expert, you do it, and you get on with it. And I build what I think is this, you know, great site. I've sweated over it, and they don't like it at the end. My feelings are going to be kind of hurt with it. It's going to be precious to me. I've invested in it, and I think these are all the things that can go wrong, and in reverse as well, where the client, maybe not at first because they perhaps even not prepared. I think this is a key thing. They're not prepared for how the creative process may not be like the usual planned business process. Things change, and it's a good thing that they also, it's become precious to them. It's about them, their website. And I think all of these things are stuff that we have to be aware of because they just creep up all the time. You only need to read something like the Clients from Hell blog to read all of the stuff that goes wrong and how crazy it sometimes can get.
Yeah, I genuinely hadn't distilled this thought until we chatted about half an hour ago. The notion that if I've done all the works, let's say, you know, basically they've said go off, do it, I am totally building that, and it becomes part of me. And at the point where I hand it over, if they don't like something, genuinely you feel a bit of, well, you know, what the heck? This is brilliant. have you got a pair of eyes? Look at it. And I never really made that connection that I was invested in. The more hours that I spent on it, the more it became a part of what I wanted and what I liked, and not necessarily what they liked. And equally, you know, if you throw them in the mix over and over again with your agile model, the more likely their desires and your desires are going to be combined. And just so many instances where I'm looking back into my past and thinking, why did I feel annoyed at the end of the day when the client had said, no, we need to really iterate on this and go back and make some amendments. And it probably was for that very reason. I thought it was the best for them, and I was wrong.
Yeah, and I think you can get hideous compromise as well, because if the client really doesn't like it and then they decide that they're going to iterate on it with you slowly, not to try and not tread on your toes, but they really are, then everybody's kind of, you know, there's this kind of stupid game going on. I have a kind of working theory, which I'm kind of putting forward in a kind of separate video about how that our process is often business-like in the beginning. So, you know, particularly with the traditional model, you have to kind of set to the plan of what you expect to be delivered before the process starts. And, you know, they may have in their mind what they want, but through the process that they'll realize it's actually not true. And then they end up with a form of cognitive dissonance where what they really believe in isn't with their behavior. You know, they believe the plan, they're good at planning and that's what should carry on, but they actually want something different. And then that's why I think it all goes a little bit crazy with stuff, because the honesty goes. So I'm a big fan on the agile if it could be made to work, in the sense that in theory, when you are working with the person, so you have to find a system where you work as a team to put the whole thing together, so everyone has a role. So there isn't a period where there is, I've done this so much and now I want your feedback. They are literally involved in the building of it. So their time is put to use not to undoing stuff, but actually towards doing it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my way. But I think it's almost a bit of the psychology in there. I just think if you can, I'm not saying it's an easy thing to do, but if you can find a system where they can be involved in it as they go along, then, you know, that's probably the ideal, because you are working together and not treading on each other's toes.
Yeah. The model that I've always used is the non-agile model, and I have to say in most cases it really has worked pretty well for me.
Yeah.
I've managed to get from them what I need, and we'll talk about content gathering in just a moment. I don't mean content, I mean just the idea. We've created a website in our heads and it would appear that we've aligned, and then I go off and I spend X amount of weeks doing it, and mostly on the whole I hit the target, and there's a few things that we might discuss about that. But it does work, but it does require quite a lot of back end work. You've got to spend a lot of time deciding, iterating on the design, wireframing, and deciding on brand assets and getting a decision made on logos and who you're going to communicate with and all of those kind of things. But it does work. There is a process that can work. I think you've just got to be a little bit more disciplined at the beginning in terms of setting up all of the bits and pieces that need to be in place. And then also you need to be fairly disciplined when you're actually building it, making sure that you stick to and keep to the research that you did. There's no point in asking them 1,000 questions and then just getting on and building what you like and ignoring what they requested. So it does work. And on the whole, for me, it worked very well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the ideal scenario is that they just kind of trust you to do it and go away. But
yes, and then are very happy.
Maybe not. Yeah, but maybe not. The more invested they are in a project, then the more likelihood I think is that they'll invest more in the medium, in the long, term future, so that can present us with more work. So I don't know, swings and roundabouts, I think.
Both of us have been in Facebook threads in the past where we've encountered people like you and I who build websites who have gotten to the point where they're really terribly upset with the clients and justifiably so. I'm sure in some cases the client genuinely has misbehaved or is being negligent or really reneging on what it is they agreed. But I think also some of those conversations really do go back to not listening and not talking to each other and not making sure that you're on the same page and communicating. So this idea of this client from hell, I'm sure it's true, but equally, I think sometimes we have to question whether or not we are the website builder from hell, and they're getting off the phone and saying, I'll never work with them again. They just never listen. They don't communicate well. They're asking me for all these things and I've no idea how to give it to them. They just haven't explained anything clearly enough. And maybe we need to be cognizant of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we can all end up in that situation, and what we do is we argue with logic when really what we're feeling is a kind of emotional. It's really about how precious I think these things end up becoming to us.
Yes.
And as we get a bit mature over time, and I've cocked up with plenty of clients, on that. I get a bit precious, but I think after all these years, I've started to work out what's going on with me.
Yeah, it's interesting because sometimes you genuinely, and I don't mean you, I mean one genuinely knows that what they want is inferior to what you wish to do. And I'm always caught by that. And usually in the end, for the want of a quieter life, I normally demur to what they want and just sort of explain, look, we could do this. I think this would be better. But if you insist upon doing that, well, it's your website. I shall do it your way. And I think I'm happy to carry that if the client insists upon it.
Yeah. So should we talk about the next one, which is the content gathering, which the interesting thing for me is the traditional model with this one. So, you sign your contract. Usually that's got something about they need to provide the content to you. And that's usually the first thing that needs to happen on the project. And that's where the biggest failure seems to be in the whole process.
I would like to hold my hand up at this point and say I do not think there is a perfect solution for this. I never found it. I tried everything. I mean, really, I tried everything that it was in my power to try. Google Drive, Dropbox, all sorts of SaaS-related apps that purported to fix this problem. And every solution that I had met with failure at some point. It might have been real bad failure in that really nothing came my way, or it might have just been the occasional failure, but there was no perfect system. So I think this one, if you're new to doing websites, you are guaranteed to have this problem. And the problem is simply this: in order to build a website and to get it to a point of being finished, there is a boatload of stuff that you're going to need from the client, be that copy, be that logos, be that images or videos. There's just things that you're going to need from them. And you will not get all of it immediately, and you will not get all of it in the perfect format that's easy for you to understand. And again, I think the problem really goes back to communication right at the beginning, working out with the client, okay, what is the system that works best for you, and what is the system that works best for me? Is there some sort of happy ground where we both meet? Oh, we're both adept with Google Drive. Brilliant. We'll both use Google Drive. Or, well, the client says, I've never heard of Google Drive, but I'm pretty good at writing email. Okay, maybe that's the way we need to go. I genuinely don't have an answer to this. It always fails.
Yeah, I think you've really made the point there about you kind of got to play to their strengths, haven't you, to what they're familiar with, and the higher the level is there, the better. I mean, if all they can manage is to stick stuff in an email, then probably it's going to be easier to cope with that and deal with it our end, because at least we are fairly proficient at that stuff, rather than have to try and train the client to learn a new tool. So I think it's you can't. I mean, it's one of my favorite expressions all the time for this kind of stuff. You can't bang square pegs into round holes, and that's what you end up doing when you set a system they must follow.
Do you know what would be? Sorry, I interrupted you. Carry on. Sorry.
Yeah. No, that's fine. That's all I needed to say.
I was simply going to say that I wonder how much time has been wasted by both of us trying to coach people into something that ultimately wasn't optimal. How many hours have you spent trying to tell people how to use Google Drive or Dropbox, or set up a Dropbox folder and tell them, okay, we're going to name all of the folders in this manner, and they never do it. And whereas if you'd gone to them and said, okay, if I want these things from you, how would you best do it? I'm not saying that's the perfect way. I'm just saying I never really tried that conversation. And so that would be something that I probably ought to try.
Yeah, me too. And that's where I think I'm having to head a lot more to just be kind of aware of that. And keeping it as simple as possible is my big thing at the moment. So, whatever will achieve the job. Where previously, I think, you used to get excited about the idea that your business would look more professional, all the time. And that would lead you, that kind of entrepreneurial sort of spirit, to sort of want to building great systems that are really impressive. But
do you know, I think you've just said something absolutely brilliant there. You wanted to look professional. And that was the mantra, right? You wanted it to look inside this formula of what professional is. And I couldn't care less as a consumer. Let's say I go to a lawyer, and I wish to use lawyers' services. I couldn't care less how professional they looked if I was confused and had no idea where we were, how to give them the things that I needed. I would far rather a lawyer who, looked, in inverted commas, less professional, but I could get along with and understand all of the steps along the process. So really throw looking professional out the window a bit for the sake of being professional and getting the things off them that you need.
Yeah, I think you've nailed it there. And it's about those, in the end of the day, when we start working together in some form or another, it's a collaboration, and that relies on a relationship, and that relationship's got to be good. So, it's about our own egos, isn't it? Looking professional. So. Yeah.
And again, getting back to the sort of Facebook groups, this does appear to be the point where everything can fall apart. The content gathering bit seems to be the thing that can crack the egg wide open. I don't quite know why it causes so many problems. Like I said, it's never ultimately been an absolute killer for me, but it feels like from some of the threads that I've read in the past that it really can kill people. So if you're new to this is something really worthy of thinking about, possibly more than anything I think that we've mentioned so far. This is huge. Figure out a way that you're going to get content off your clients, and maybe that way is going to be different for each of the clients. Maybe forcing your way on them is ultimately going to be a cause of friction and falling out.
But my Miss A is going to have a wonderful experience compared to yours. because I'm going to go into a little bit just on the agile stuff, because in the theory, if you can make it work, I'm not saying this is easy, the content stuff is teamwork. And there is something I think that's quite important with the content you're trying to get. So for me, the worst thing that can happen is not delay in getting the content, but being given poor content, which I'm going to have to say, this is too rubbish to use. So I'd much rather build it up from the start. So if we want to get good leads, we need good copy. If they haven't got a good copywriter, let's build it up from the beginning, knowing what I know about how you might lay this out to tell a story on a homepage or a landing page. So it, from an agile perspective, in theory, it would end up being a team problem. And if it was delayed, which is often the issue, isn't it, about is this holding back the project and costing more money? It's only under that team working spirit, it's only going to be delayed if genuinely the client does have a problem with the content and needs work on it. So
are you willing in your model to sort of step in? Because I know your agile model isn't just about being responsive and not reaching too far into the future and having everything under some kind of proposal-based formula. But are you willing to sort of step in and say, do you know what? You haven't given me the images. It looks like you're struggling to get images that you're happy with. I'm just going to put something in for you for now. And the same thing with copy. I'll throw something together. It's not optimal. I'd like you to change it in the future. Are you going to be willing to bridge that gap, or are you going to just put lorem in and put some sort of grey overlaid image in just to sort of indicate there should be an image?
Yeah, well, that was the way before. Okay, so I got two routes, and I can't call these agile. So previously, I used to think, how am I going to get this jobs done? When I was thinking this is a one-day build, which is how I used to look earlier, we can get something up. So I go, if they're absent and I've got nothing, I'm going to stick an image in that I think will work. I'm going to stick the copy in and stick some law and Ipsum. And I've given them a page builder, and there's a video on how you can change it to what you need. I've done my job. Thank you very much. What I'm moving towards now is the more agile approach, where I'm going to say, actually, and this is what I think we'll talk about in the next series, some of this I hope to get forward, is where I might be able to condense some of the great ideas about laying out pages that come from things like StoryBrand, that come from copy hackers, to lay out the structure and work with the client themselves. And even if I'm doing it on their own because they're absent, they will see I will have demystified the process of getting that content structured, if you like. So if they want to join in and offer their opinions, they can, and we'll be doing it together if not. So that's where I want to go. But I mean, this is all stuff to be worked out, but that's why I think I should be going with a team spirit agile approach. If I'm adopting that's where I think I need to be able to demystify all of the stages of putting this together so they can be involved, because their opinion will be valid.
Yeah, a couple of things on that. The first thing is, I think if you went that extra mile and could in some way communicate that you'd actually filled in the blanks for them, I think that could be something that the client thinks, oh, great, that's brilliant. Oh, thanks for doing that. You might get a pat on the back, kudos for that. The flip side of that, though, is I wonder if you're setting an expectation which then you've got to live up for. It's all right, David will do it. I haven't bothered looking for an image, David will do it. So I guess that's got two sides.
It has, but the agile protects me, doesn't it? Because they're controlling the budget and the time. So if they want me to carry on doing that, then that's fine. They're going to be paying me as I haven't got that deadline budget that they're fixed to.
Yeah.
So that's the solution is there.
That's nice. Anyway, solutions to content gathering, but some interesting ideas. And definitely worth thinking about. If all that we've done is raise the awareness that you are going to struggle with this, then we've probably done our job. We won't have a solution, but we've alerted it. Go and explore in all the manifest ways that you can, how on earth you might gather content, and try and work collaboratively.
In the same vein, our next title is forms of communication. Do we ask how they like to digest content that we might give them, or information, how they want to talk to us during the whole process?
What are the options here then? I mean, you've got like email, I guess increasingly you've got things, like chat apps, Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp and Signal and all those kind of things. You've got video chat, Zoom. You've got videos that you could shoot with each other, backwards and forwards, things like this new zip message service, or just shooting a Loom video, those kind of things. Oh, and then, of course, my favourite one, the one that I've always preferred is just the good old telephone. That for me is the ultimate. If you can get them on the phone, or I guess wrap into that Zoom call, that would be the same thing. But real time communication, that I feel is the absolute ultimate, because it's just so much more easy to get things done. I feel that I can get done in 1 minute what it would take me 20 minutes to do on email.
Yes, yeah, that's true. I mean, I think, the agile way is definitely more about the live communication, working as a team anyway, but whether you can actually do that is another thing. I just think I've become more aware, or at least I'm going to start asking them a bit, because one thing for communication going out, so when I'm working on my own, then I think the best way is for me to do a screencast of where I'm up to, what considerations there are for them, where I need some answers, and then I put that in an email with some bullet point questions of which they can just return with answers on. And I've been as pleased as punch with what I've come up with there, and it seems to work well. But the thing is, I've never ever asked a client if that's kind of how they best digest that communication.
No, me neither, actually. Never said which is the best way of communicating with you. No, never really thought to do that. Always just assumed that their best way of doing it was, video, Zoom, phone, or what have you. But you've got some, around that, your little sprints. Are you shooting your summation video at the end of a sprint and saying, here's where I've done, here's where I've got to, rather now comment on this and we can move on to the next bit? Are you doing it on a daily basis? How is that hoping to work?
No, I'm still working out the system I'm going to do it. I mean, one thought that I had, which back to the simplest, way of being able to communicate, the technology that the client's going to be useful. Be used to. I think the way that we do this podcast, the way we've communicated all the way over these 5 years plus, has been through a flipping Google document where we just have some headlines and pick a color or something like that. And I have started working a little bit with, one client a couple of times. I've put up a document which is about what we're trying to do on this. We're trying to get the messaging on the homepage or something. And, to my surprise, they've quickly just jumped in there and realized what's working out in the same way that you and I do. I don't know if that's going to work for other clients, but I just thought this is so much easier than threads in emails where I get completely lost, because we just, scrap what doesn't need to be there any longer. It gets removed from the document. So are you a form of communication? Is
it just text then, or are you throwing images in there? Or I don't even know if you can throw like things like video. I don't know if you can, but are you putting all of those in as well, or is it just sort of like a text backwards and forwards?
Yeah, all I was doing to be honest, what I was doing is the new site that was doing. I said this homepage, we need certain messaging, so I was taking all that. The things I referenced before, so StoryBrand and copy hackers, and literally laying out. So we need to start with a header with a description that backs up the main message you're trying to get there, and then we'll be moving on to what problem you're solving, moving on to some of the benefits, and I'm literally listing them and writing down some of the bullet points, and they're coming in. So we're building the structure of this homepage and some of the copy together.
Okay.
Before it goes into the web. Well, actually that's not true, because I started some of the website and this is separate. But I'm just saying it's quite a nice little way of being able to sort of backwards and forwards on some information. If I tried to do it through email, it wouldn't work, because someone can imagine a Google document. It's as long as it needs to be, and you can put headers on it and make it clear what is the copy for one section. So
yeah, I guess the nice thing about the Google Doc is that there's more or less nobody who isn't familiar with something like Google Docs. Just everybody's familiar with, well, whether it be Word or Office 365 or something. I could see that working for me. I never really did do it that way. Always relied more on email, or my favorite thing, phone. But the fact that you and we've really done pretty well out of communicating through Google Docs, and I think that's a solid way to have a go, at least anyway. Yeah, nice tip, that.
Well, we use it in the most simplest way. I shared a Google document with our friend Paul AC, and suddenly got surprised to find that was got messages coming in saying about the comments he'd left. He really knew how to use his Google documents.
Yes. I guess
if it had been me, I'd have just written by the side of it.
That's right. Yeah, I guess
the
the only pitfall is that you obviously have to understand that some people may not wish to do it that way. But I think that's a pretty neat tip. Give it a go. If anybody tries it and wants to leave us a comment, let us know.
Yeah. Do you ever give any indication on the kind of tone of feedback or anything? What you kind of expect?
You mean in terms of
brusque?
Oh,
yeah.
Go on. No, I'm not following your thread there. What do you mean?
Well, some people just communicate with emails or something. They can be sometimes they think they're being efficient, I think, but they just come across as brusque. They literally just sharp comments where you can't get any indication about what they feel about something. They're just literally running it.
All right, so something along the lines of change the logo, see attachment. That's it. That's all you get.
Exactly. Yeah, that kind of thing.
I probably would react to that actually, but I wouldn't let them know. I would probably see it as a kind of a failing on their part to not take the time to write, "Dear Nathan, I have attached a new image which I would prefer on the website. You can find it in this email. Thank you so much for your time." Blah blah blah. That's the way I would like to be treated. But if somebody literally writes me the replace logo, see attachment, I'd just get on with it and swallow that. But I can see how that would kind of annoy people. Yeah, people really genuinely do have a different approach to that. And I've received emails from friends who clearly are short on time, and it is kind of weird thinking, hang on, we're friends, why are you writing like that? I just don't react, I guess is the key message there. But I don't set any expectations out in terms of any proposals or anything, any contracts as to the way we would like to be communicated with. I just assume that people are going to make a best effort, and I've never written a reply saying, "I'm sorry, I will not respond to this email until you rewrite it in a more polite manner."
No, I think probably people take the lead from you, how you communicate. I think possibly that is it.
Yeah. One of the things that I was really getting into a little while ago, and I would say this is, and you mentioned it, you're clearly doing it, is the weekly summation video. Just bang out an email on a Friday, literally 1 minute, showing what you did during that week. Obviously, in my approach, during that week, they probably haven't seen anything at all. As far as they're concerned, it's a black hole, unless they've taken the time to go and look at the staging site, which is freely available for them to see. By the way, I do that. And I just say, this week we've worked on the menus. They now look like this. And if you hover over it, this happens. And we've also got the map widget going, and it looks like this, and so on and so forth. And it takes seconds, and it just gives them a little bit of a heads up as to what's going on. And in my impression, those emails never get replied to, but they never get objected to either. And I think you are just putting a bit of you're sort of protecting yourself in that you are illustrating what you've done during that week. But also, I suspect most of them were getting looked at, but there was no call to action to reply. It was just, okay, this is where we're at. And it just seemed to make the road smoother and keep the communications channels alive.
Yeah. Almost segue beautifully into the next thing, which is the revisions of changes of mind and how you deal with them. Because you were saying about, because something I didn't really appreciate until you told me earlier was the fact that they can see what you're doing if they want to go and have a peep.
Yeah, I don't know if this is everybody's approach. It just never struck me as a weird thing to do, but I'm conscious that some people might think this is weird. I would simply put a subdomain of my website. So, I don't know, testwebsite.example.com, and then I would give that to them right at the beginning, because I never took the notion that, well, I don't want them to see what they're doing. And I think most of them probably didn't look at it that often, but there was definitely clients that did, because they would communicate to me unprompted, could we change, the blue? And I would say, oh, okay, yeah, you've noticed that. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, what would you like instead? And that system, I think, works. There's just no hiding it. And it does, I guess it does make the revision process a little bit easier, because they come in dribs and drabs rather than a boatload at the end. Because my process, I bet this is nothing new to anybody, was just 2 rounds of revisions. When I finish it, I hand it over. You get a first round of revisions. I never put any language in my contracts around what that revision process looked like. So had they come back to me and said, it's all rubbish, we need to revise all of it, I don't know what I would have said at that point, but it never happened, luckily. And and then after that round of revisions, I do that, and then there's a final one, and I make it pretty clear in the language, look, whatever you tell me now to do, that's it. There's no more, can we tweak it a bit after this? You've got to be very careful and thoughtful and mindful, write it in full, go to whatever lengths you need to be clear on this, and after that, we're done. It's actually very rare that I got to the Second Amendment. Usually the first round of amendments had it nailed.
Oh, that's good. I mean, that is the thing. We talk about revisions, we'll allow a couple of them, but the depth of those revisions and how much work they might mean. I mean, if somebody says, just one revision, we just need a shop page now, and you suddenly realise that your site's become e-commerce,
Sorry,
happens.
just to clarify that, a revision in my head, and I don't think I spelled it out, is a change to something which exists. So it literally is, it's true to the word revision. It's going over something which is already there. It was never new things, and anything that's new is totally out of scope. It's not happening.
Yes, a revision to the whole project would be. No, that makes sense. And I think most people would understand that. But there is some things, I mean, it's not such a problem now. I used to find when people used to want to change certain areas which were dynamic in WordPress, like headers and footers, that was much more complex than other things, and they would have no clue as to which was going to take up more time. Why should they?
Right.
For them, it was all just stuff on a page.
No, that's totally true, isn't it? Some things like if you just suddenly wanted a telephone icon in the menu in the past, that was a bit of a big deal. I mean, not a big deal, but it wasn't like super quick. Whereas now with more modern themes, that might be like milliseconds to do. So,
Yeah. I mean, there's that classic comic, which I think everybody knows, the oatmeal.com comics. It's design_hell, so you can find it from that URL. But it's how revisions lead to this, horrible, nasty kind of looking site. And I think that is always the problem. But I mean, we covered it in a way. I think a lot of it is about that being precious and about understanding, accommodating each other in that process, isn't it? Being aware of, how the client's going to feel, how important it's going to be to them, and picking up on that early and making the client aware as well. If you're going to leave me with it with high expectations, I'm going to invest in it, so you're going to hurt my feelings if you don't check in and want to change it all at the end. So
the nice thing about your approach is that you don't get this sort of moment in time where you've just suddenly got these round revisions at the end, and you are hoping that everything is as it should be and that the revision rounds are going to be small and insignificant. Your approach, I presume, I mean, you could really almost regard your entire website build as a round of revisions.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the idea is literally it should be teamwork. It should be something you build together. Obviously, everyone's got their own disciplines, but you would think we're all professional enough that someone's not going to. Somebody said to me once, quite recently, about when I said about collaborative design with clients, why would anybody want to do that? You're the expert, you do that. You wouldn't do that with a mechanic fixing your car. And it's like, no, I wouldn't do it with a mechanic fixing my car because I wouldn't have the first clue to do what they're doing. So I wouldn't do it. And that's different from me working with a client. I've got certain skills which they will never have, and they will never attempt to do that. But it doesn't mean that they can't have a valid view when we're picking, as long as they understand the theory of a color palette, that they can't help with why they think that might be more suited to their target audience. And in fact, they're probably better placed than me to know what is best for their target audience. So their contributions are valuable, I think, within that team working.
Your solution brings to mind that famous phrase, give a man a fish and he'll eat for a day, teach him how to fish and he'll fish forever kind of thing. And, to take that one step further, it's a bit like the mechanic bringing you in as he repairs something and says, okay, now I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do that, and now I'm going to... And look, we've fixed the problem. You can probably do that yourself now, can't you? Because you've watched and seen and been instructed. It's possible. You probably could go away and do that thing, but it's not the model that I've ever used. But I can totally see why that would have value. And yeah.
But in some ways, you can imagine it. You can imagine it in a band situation. So you play guitar and the drummer's there and the bassist. But often, if you're trying to put something together, you can go, why don't you just do this with the bass? You're not going to take over and play the bass for them. You're not going to say how it's going to be best to put, but you might be able to give them a hint of how it might work with something. Same with the drumming. But you don't tread on each other's toes. You are team working to make something that works together. And I think that's how an agile approach should work. You don't necessarily, you don't take somebody else's instruments and do it. You recognize that they know better, but you might be able to give them an idea of which they can work with.
Yeah. I think this is...
I'm selling agile here, aren't I? Big time.
I'll tell you what, the more that this podcast goes on, the more I want to abandon my side, but there'll be no content, so I'm going to stick to my guns. Agile's rubbish. Give it up, David. Okay. Next one is ghosting, going off the radar, delaying.
Yeah. So that's another problem. I mean, it happens, doesn't it? It's happening to me right now with two of my best clients. Disappeared, they have.
When you say disappeared, just like, are you phoning them up? Are you just emailing and the emails are not getting responded to? What level of disappearance are we dealing with here?
No, it's fine. I mean, they have responded. One who I've been working on a project with, I'm delighted that they have disappeared, because it's partly a result of the rebuild I did on his other site has given him a bit more work. So the fact that he's now a bit too busy to get on with the new site we're doing is, something that cheers me no end. But they have replied and said, I'll have to put it back. But it wasn't what our kind of plan was with it. So I've no problem. I'm a lot calmer. You are. You've always been calm on this one, haven't you? If people disappear, you go, it's fine. I've got something else I can do.
I was always lucky enough to have another bit of work which needed doing. So my approach was simply just to do the other bit of work. And that approach never really bit me. I mean, it's not to say that you don't send them the email or send them the phone call to say, look, we really do need this thing. It is actually urgent. But I just say, well, the contract said it as well, that if you delay, then it won't get finished, basically, is what it says. I can't remember the exact language, but any delays that are not us will push the deadline back. And I do make the point that I am willing to undertake other work which might further delay what it is that you're doing. Because, if I start on another piece of work and I really get my head into it, I might be on that for another week or a week and a half or whatever. And, I think everybody gets that to some extent. And I feel quite lucky in that nobody ever really pushed back on that. I did get on with other pieces of work, and I just politely sent them the email saying, thank you for sending me the image. That's brilliant. We're just involved with a few other things now because of the delay, and we'll get back to you at the beginning of next week or whatever it was. So that was always my approach, and it was one that I liked.
Yeah, that works for what you were doing. So, but I mean, it's sticking with the traditional model, even the agile one, when you think about it, a lot of people build in the financial penalties in with this one because the potential to go and take on another, if you're a big agency and you've put so much of your staff forward and they're delaying, you can't take on your next work, so somebody has to pay for that lost time. Your business.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Never something that I needed to concern myself with. But do you so moving into agile, and obviously everything you just said, are you going to do any of that? Are you going to financially penalise people, or at least tell them that you're going to? Or are you going to work more towards my laissez-faire approach?
Well, it's already laissez-faire because I've got to get out because there's no end cost. So,
of course, yeah.
Oh, I see what you mean. If they disappear and then I can't take work, well, because it's in sprints of work, I will. So in effect, I'm saying if they do disappear, I might take in other work, which means that, like you, effectively, it's the same thing. We end up delayed on restarting their work. So they just have to know that's the consequences.
So the delay in effect is a financial penalty because, time is money kind of thought.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, they run it. If you've got that, you're free, and they can book these slots available, and then they disappear, and then you think you're going to put, in my case, 2 sprints together to complete it, or 3, and they break. I might take on work, and then those slots so they're pushed back even further on their, the delay. Which, on a bigger scale, I mean, that's one of the reasons for Agile itself, is the fact that by having big projects, the period of time it takes to get to launch means that all that money, if you had something out, that could be bringing you in a return. So it's it's a loss to them, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you did, yeah.
Well, I was just going to say,
not.
I suppose you've got to think a little bit from the client perspective as well. Maybe we need to be asking questions about why there's a delay, not just there's a delay.
Yes, yeah.
It might be apropos to sort of communicate and say, look, there is a delay. Is there anything I need to know about? And it might be completely legitimate. I mean, just before we got on the call, we talked about, who knows, maybe there's been some sort of family crisis that can't be avoided. Maybe the business has had to change in unexpected ways. You just don't know. There may be a totally legitimate way, but I think typically we tend to see the lack of communication, or the the going off the radar, or ghosting us, or whatever. We seem to often take that as a chance to get angry, as opposed to a chance to figure out why they've gone off radar. And I imagine there's probably more benefit figuring it out than. The ironic thing, I suppose, would be that you'll probably send them an email asking why they've gone off radar, and you don't get a reply.
Yeah, but honestly, I think that's such a great point, because I think and sometimes people don't answer out of shame.
Yep.
They're actually embarrassed that they've disappeared. So.
Oh yeah, I mean, how many times? I mean, being honest, how many times have you gone off the radar with somebody that you shouldn't have gone off the radar with, and then some immeasurable period of time passes, and now it's too long? It's like, Oh my goodness, it's been a whole week. I can't possibly. I've done that. To my shame, I've done those kind of things, and somehow it just takes somebody to reach out. It's kind of weird, like friends that I knew at university who I don't speak to now because I don't speak to them now. And that's the only reason I've got. And then I've done it a few times. I actually did it in lockdown quite a lot. Just got in touch with them utterly out the blue, and it was like, just natter. It's like, why didn't we do this before? That kind of approach might just work. Using the phone again for me.
Yeah, I think most of the time there's good reasons. It's worth, like you say, it's worth finding out the reasons. I think there is one tip for anybody who is starting this new. One thing that has kind of annoyed the life out of me is sorting out the DNS, getting it over to my hosting uses the case. And when there's some third party, not the client, it just goes horribly wrong, because in most cases the client then wants to duck out because they say, I don't know, I had this tech guy before and you're the new tech guys, talk to each other, will you please? And so I've learned with that one to start thinking about that one a lot earlier and try and get the logins to know what's going on with that.
Totally with you. I get it. That one is a bit of a nightmare, isn't it? And there's no real way of fixing that by being nice. It's just got to happen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's really annoying at the end of something, at least if they can be sorting it out while you're working on the project. But it's the thing that when you think time's been used up and you're ended it and you're wasting time chasing somebody, that's the worst. Yes. So I start it earlier.
And then you get those emails. My website can't go live. Why? What? Oh, and it's just impenetrable nonsense about DNS that nobody understands, including me, I might add. I think we've done it. I think we've basically got there, haven't we? Apart from final thoughts.
Yeah, final thoughts, which is really what we've been saying through all of this. It's really just about how we can kind of be kind to each other. And it sounds terrible, doesn't it? People are throwing up listening to this. But it is about that. It's about good relationships with the clients, isn't it? And about understanding where they're coming from and also how we're likely to react as well when we get feedback.
Yes. This is we're painting a very rosy picture here, aren't we? We haven't yet imagined the client who literally is obstinate, will disobey everything that we ask, and is just blatantly rude. We're hoping that we don't have those kind of people. If we do, just all of this episode goes out the window. But I think you're right. Let's sum it up as good relationships are the key. I think if you try to keep that going. But harking back, I think the main takeaway for me from this episode is the content gathering thing. That it probably is going to be the biggest point of friction. So if you can figure out a way of making that work for you, hurrah!
Yeah.
But also, can you tell us all how you did it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
we'll steal that.
Yeah.
Okay, next we've got a bonus episode. Not anyone will know this apart from us, that we're putting into this season 1, the last one of this before the build section. Episode 6, we thought we'd really ask the question: where's the next client coming from?
Yes, that's a good point. I remember a friend of mine at university, always about 2/3 of the way through a meal, he would always ask, what was the next meal? And it was like, okay, we haven't finished this one yet, but yeah, that's a good point. You can't get to the end of this website build and then start to be looking for clients, because there's probably going to be quite a delay. So where is the next client coming from? Episode 6, that'll be in a couple of weeks' time.
It will.
Okay.
Anyway, that was fun.
Yeah, that was fun. Thank you, David, and I will speak to you in 2 weeks' time. See ya.
Yeah. Cheers. Bye.
Well, I hope that you enjoyed that episode. It was lovely chatting to David Wormsley, as always. If you enjoyed it, if you thought it was interesting, or indeed if you think it was objectionable and you've got a comment to make which is negative, don't worry, that's fine. Head over to wpbuilds.com and search for episode number 265. There is, of course, an archive. You can look for the podcast archive in the main menu at the top. But episode 265, leave a comment Leave a comment in there, or head over to our Facebook group, wpbuilds.com/Facebook, and you could leave a comment in there. Again, search for episode number 265. Right, we will be back with another podcast episode, this time in 1 week, so next Thursday. It will be an interview, because we flip-flop between interviews with guests in the WordPress community and my chats with David Wormsley. So next week it'll be an interview. And also we'll be back every Monday, 2 p.m. UK time, live this week in WordPress. So join us for some of that. If I don't see you, I hope you have a very nice week. Stay safe. I'm going to fade in some cheesy music and say bye-bye for now.